Now reporting, George Stephanopoulos.
Good afternoon. We are coming on the air right now because President Trump has just spoken to reporters at the White House. A packed day in the Capitol, and just 2 hours after another North Korean launch of a ballistic missile, an intercontinental ballistic missile, their third ever. Launch from North Korea traveled about 600 miles towards Japan. The president expected to address that at the top of this pool spray, which happened in the Roosevelt Room in the White House just moments ago.
Thank you very much. As you probably have heard, and some of you have reported, a missile was launched a little while ago from North Korea. I will only tell you that we will take care of it. We have General Mattis in the room with us, and we've had a long discussion on it. It is a situation that we will handle. With that being said, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi did not show up for our meeting today. I'm not really that surprised. We have a lot of differences. They're weak on crime. They're weak on illegal immigration. They want the illegal folks to come pouring into our border, and a lot of problems are being caused. Although we've stopped it to a large extent, as much as you can without the wall, which we're going to get. Before this meeting and before this missile launch, they've been weak on military in terms of spending. Very hard to get for military. They want it for a lot of other things, but the military is always secondary to them. The military, to me, is number one. We won't be here without our powerful military, and we're building it up stronger, bigger, better than ever before, and General Mattis can testify to that. And the other thing, they want tax increases, and we want major tax decreases. So they decided not to show up. They've been all talk, and they've been no action. And now it's even worse. Now it's not even talk. So they're not showing up for the meeting. I will say this, in light of the missile launch, probably they'll be here fairly quickly, or at least discussions will start taking place fairly quickly. I think that we're in a very good position in terms of the meeting we just had over at the Capitol with the Republican senators. It was outstanding. I think we have tremendous support. I was just informed by Mitch that we had a unanimous vote from the Republican side, at least. We had a unanimous vote on the tax bill, and it goes now the next step, and I think we're going to get it passed. I think it's going to pass, and it's going to be very popular. It's going to have lots of adjustments before it ends. But the end result would be a very, very massive, the largest in the history of our country, tax cut, and lots of good things are going to happen, including the bringing back to our country of, it probably will end up being over $4 trillion money offshore that's stagnant, that companies, and they're just not able to bring it back. So I think it's going to be a number over $4 trillion. Corporate will be able to compete now against the world. If you look at China, if you look at so many other countries, if you look at many of the countries, China's at 15%. They're lower than us. We're getting it down to a level that is either going to be lower or right in the ballpark, so that we can compete much better with our companies, our great, great companies. And that means jobs, and it means lots of other things. I'm very happy to see that the consumer confidence level is just about the highest it's ever been. In fact, I don't want to make any mistakes in front of the press because you'll get me on it, but to the best of my knowledge, it's the highest it's ever been. Consumer confidence has been setting records. They have confidence in the people leading their country. And I will say that I think it's going to go better and better, and I do believe that this vote on taxes, which are really tax cuts and reform, is going to be very, very important. So we had a good day today. We had a phenomenal meeting with the Republican senators. We had, it was very special, that meeting. In many respects, I wish you could have been inside that room. It was very, very special. The camaraderie. It was somewhat of a love fest. They want to see it happen. They want to see it happen, not only for the Republican Party. I think much more importantly, they want to see it happen for the country, because they know how important it is for us to compete and win. And with that, maybe we'll start with Paul Ryan to say a few words about where we stand with different things, and then I'll ask Mitch McConnell.
Okay.
President Trump there speaking to reporters in the Roosevelt Room on a number of issues that broke today, including that North Korean missile test. The president saying it is a situation we will handle. The president also responding to the passage in the Senate Budget Committee of that tax reform bill that's going to go to the Senate floor right now. And those empty seats you saw next to him, the seats for the Democratic leaders in the House and Senate, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, who chose not to come to a meeting on a looming government shutdown in early December after a taunting tweet from the president this morning. I want to bring in our chief global affairs anchor, Martha Raddatz, for more on this response from the president. Third ever ICBM test from the North Koreans, the first one in 2 months, a relatively measured response from the president.
A fairly measured response. What we've seen, George, is sometimes he doesn't respond at all, and other times he responds with statements calling for fire and fury in response. But this missile, this third missile, traveled farther into space than any of the two prior ones. It also was flying for a longer amount of time, about 50 minutes. This also follows China sending a high-level delegation into North Korea, and the U.S. putting it back on a state sponsor of terrorism list, having been removed from that in 2008. And yet, this is how North Korea responds.
And Martha, it appeared to land in waters just off Japan, inside Japanese territory?
The economic exclusion zone, it's called. But I think what's also important, George, is it wasn't aimed at Guam. It traveled into the Sea of Japan where the others have. So it wasn't as provocative as it could have been, but provocative nonetheless.
President taking questions. Let's listen in.
It's going to be bigger, better, stronger. It already is than ever before. But we want to get going on that now. So that is a difference, in all fairness, from this morning, when I told them that we're way, way far away. And with that, I may just have General Mattis say just a couple of words about what he has found out. General, do you want to say just a couple of little pieces of information?
Mr. President, Senators,
Secretary of Defense James Mattis.
2.5 hours ago, North Korea launched an intercontinental ballistic missile. It went higher, frankly, than any previous shot they've taken. It's a research and development effort on their part to continue building ballistic missiles that could threaten everywhere in the world, basically. And in response, the South Koreans have fired some pinpoint missiles out into the water to make certain North Korea understands that they could be taken under fire by our ally. But the bottom line is it's a continued effort to build a threat, a ballistic missile threat that endangers world peace, regional peace, and certainly the United States.
Thank you, General. And we will take care of that situation. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
President Trump wrapping up those remarks in the Roosevelt Room right now. I want to bring in our senior White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega, for more on this as well. And Cecilia, you heard the president got some good news and some somewhat bad news on the domestic front today. Senate Budget Committee passed their version of the tax cut plan. It's going to head to the Senate floor right now, but farther away than ever from the Democrats to avoid that possible government shutdown as early as December 8th.
Yeah, it has been a real tit for tat all day here between Capitol Hill and this White House. You saw that he is sitting there with very strategically placed empty chairs, as you mentioned at the top of this, those chairs that were supposed to be, as he likes to call them, Chuck and Nancy. No mention, of course, of his own tweet that prompted Chuck and Nancy, if you will, Schumer and Pelosi, to not show up here. This baiting tweet that he sent out this morning, goading them essentially, and they didn't show up. They took that. But I want to say, George, I was really struck. You know, cameras were not initially supposed to be in that Roosevelt Room today. This was going to be a closed event with the Big Five and Big Four and the president himself. And then at the last minute they were let in, and that is because the president had a message that he wanted to get out there. What strikes me, though, is how little this president said about North Korea in the wake of what we were told is the longest duration of a missile in the air, 50 minutes. And as you heard Mattis there say, the highest North Korean missile ever fired. President Trump just mentioned it and then moved on to going right back about Nancy and Chuck. So clearly the message really that he wanted to send here, partly North Korea, but predominantly about the fight and this tit for tat happening between him and the Democrats on tax reform. And we will see now if this is the first in a series of new tests from the North Korean government. Cecilia Vega, Martha Raddatz, thanks very much. We're going to sign off right now. Much more tonight on World News Tonight with David Muir, and I'll see you tomorrow on GMA.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
Hey everybody, thanks for sticking with us here on ABC. I'm John Santucci alongside White House correspondent Tara Palmieri inside the Washington Bureau of ABC News. We just saw President Trump give remarks from the Roosevelt Room, some empty chairs on each side of him as he spoke, symbolizing that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi were not there for a scheduled meeting at the White House to talk through budget reform. Also talked about the attack that just happened, the missile that was launched, rather, by North Korea. I want to go straight to our senior White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega, who I believe is still with us. Cecilia, I was listening to you speaking to George right there, and same thing stuck out to me. The fact that this president did not talk more about North Korea, and the fact that we know multiple times he's gone much further when the missile has not gone as far as it did in this instance. No fire and fury, pretty surprising. What do you think this means for the president? Maybe they're taking this a little more seriously?
Well, you know, it's interesting just not having come back from this trip to Asia not that long ago, where the message from on high was the president was not going to change his language when he got on foreign soil in the shadow of Pyongyang. But he did. He had a much more toned down rhetoric that we heard on that trip. And really that has stuck, I would say, with the exception of that tweet where he essentially called Kim Jong-un short and fat. But this is not the we are going to totally destroy North Korea President Trump that we've heard from in the past. Look, these are remarkable comments. It is a situation we will handle. We don't know what that means. This is a White House that has sort of gone back and forth on, a president, I should say, that has gone back and forth on his message of whether diplomacy, quiet diplomacy, is working. You remember he bashed his own Secretary of State and said that Tillerson was wasting time negotiating with North Korea. But then not long after that said he would be willing to be friends and strike up a friendship with Kim Jong-un, and that would be a good thing for the world. So mixed messages on that front. But you know, what is not lost in the message here today is that cameras were not supposed to be in this room. This White House clearly wanted to have the president get out front on this fight with Chuck and Nancy, if you will, his favorite names for the two Democrats who were supposed to be here and didn't show up. So they had to talk about North Korea because it happened shortly before this meeting was supposed to happen. But really, the message from this White House today is this is a dig at Democrats. This is a tit for tat that is continuing and not going away. And those empty chairs that were right next to him, very strategically placed, not unintentional at all from this White House.
And we should know that this all started this morning by the president tweeting out that this meeting was basically, in his eyes, pointless because there won't be a deal. And thus the Democrats said, fine, then we're not going to show up. Cecilia, I know you need to get over to World News, so we'll let you go. Thanks as much for always playing. Let's shoot over to the Pentagon with ABC's Louis Martinez, who's been watching this. And Louis, you know, you were saying to our gang over here that the thing that stuck out to you, besides the fact how far this missile had gone, this was very rare for North Korea to do a test like this in the middle of the night.
No, you're exactly right. Very rare that North Korea launches a missile, and particularly at 3 in the morning, essentially, was local time. That's when it occurred. We had gotten indications. We had seen these press reports overnight that maybe North Korea might be gearing up for something. This was based on Japanese press reports that the Japanese government had picked up some kind of radioactivity. We'd followed up on that, and we've been told, yes, there seems to be some kind of activity that is consistent with what we've seen in earlier launches. But there was some hesitation on the part of the U.S. official that I spoke to actually say they are preparing for a launch. So when we got the word that they did, it was kind of surprising. But even more to the case, surprising that this is another ICBM. It's been 75 days since North Korea launched another missile. And as Cecilia mentioned, there was during that time, we've seen a lot of progress on the U.S. diplomatic front in terms of China getting on board with tougher talk with North Korea, the sending of that delegation there. So initiatives that seem maybe the progress is being seen with regards to North Korea, maybe getting towards some kind of eventual talks. But now this is going to be another provocation. Mild language so far from the president, but again, you hear him say this is a situation that we're going to deal with. It always remains unclear exactly what he's referencing.
Yeah, I mean, and how many times we heard him wait and see, we'll see what happens. I mean, this is a president that is very clear. He is not going to make his playbook open and show his cards to the world. Louis, one other question for you, just for our viewers to understand, because obviously there's been a lot of these incidents that have happened with North Korea where they've tested a missile and then nothing's really gone forward from there. But the response from South Korea so quickly to fire off missiles of their own, is that typical, Louis?
That is a typical response. It's a proportional response that is undertaken by the U.S. and South Korea jointly, typically. In this case, it was only South Korea. The point here is that they can want to demonstrate to North Korea, sure, you've fired a missile, but we want to show to you that we could respond immediately if we had to by targeting those missile systems where they were fired from. So in this case, what they did is they fired a missile. The exact distance from where, let's say, the distance between the launch point in South Korea and where the launch point in North Korea, to show we can hit that target base pretty quickly if we needed to. It's a response. It's a measured response, right. But again, it demonstrates the capabilities. In this case, there was no U.S. involvement. Like I've mentioned in the past, we've seen U.S. and South Korean missiles fired right after these launches. Again, a show of force. And, there may be other shows of force in the works as well. We've seen these long-range B-1 missile flights that have gone from Guam off the coast of South Korea, sometimes overflying South Korea, sometimes even conducting bombing runs. And the significance there, again, the U.S. has the capability to reach deep into North Korea if they wanted to. And as we know from President Trump, he's not taking military options off the table, even though the administration continues pursuing a diplomatic course to try to resolve North Korea's provocations.
Louis Martinez, I know you're going to be watching this over at the Pentagon. For us, thank you. We'll check back with you later today. Turning back here into the Bureau with Tara Palmieri, this has obviously been, to everyone's point so far, a back and forth for the president, right? Either we're going to do this diplomatically or fire and fury, we're going to go get them. That response today sounds like we're not fully at fire and fury, but we're going away from diplomatic answers here.
It seems to me that he got some sobering information while he was in China, perhaps something that made him think that they should bring back some of the language. Perhaps there was a deal with the Chinese because they have really promised to put the pressure on North Korea, and obviously that hasn't worked. And so clearly they're realizing that China, the pressure from China is not doing enough, and that maybe they have some new information and some understanding from the region about what those words mean for them.
This is going to be an ongoing thing. We're going to be watching it all day here at ABC. I do want to switch gears, though, because the real intention of that meeting before the president starts about North Korea is the fact that Chuck and Nancy didn't show up, the invitations, all of this stuff, the tax battle, and that's why we have Ali Rogan up on Capitol Hill for us. Hey, Ali, I know you've been watching this, the vote count on where this stands. The president turned to Mitch McConnell there in the Roosevelt Room and said, looks like we've got all the Republicans on board. Seems like that's true, Ali, but this ain't a done deal.
Yeah, you guys, that stagecraft in there with the two empty seats on either side of President Trump with the place cards that said Pelosi and Schumer, that was some really A-grade stagecraft going on there, showing that they didn't show up today. But getting back to the substance of the tax bill and sort of the politics that are at play, this was a very good day for the tax writers and Republicans who want to advance this bill in the Senate. First of all, after the meeting with President Trump, you had a bunch of Republican senators coming out, those who had been on the fence before, and saying they were getting to yes. Senator Susan Collins among them, saying that the president said in that closed-door lunch with all of the Senate Republican members that he favors a provision that would allow taxpayers to deduct more of their property taxes, which isn't currently in the Senate bill. And then fast forward to a little later this afternoon, the Senate Budget Committee advanced this bill through a sort of key procedural vote on a party line but unanimous among Republicans vote. One of the key members that we've been watching very closely there was Senator Ron Johnson, who opposed parts of this bill because he said it would favor some smaller businesses over big corporations. And yet Senator Johnson voted in favor of this bill. Now, the big question, though, is how are you going to pay for all of these concessions that are making to get some of the folks on board? And the problem is that there are other Senate Republicans who still have concern about the overwhelming price tag that accompanies this bill to the tune of $1.5 trillion. That includes folks like Senator Jeff Flake, Senator Bob Corker, who also is on the Budget Committee, but just because Senators Corker and Johnson voted for this to advance this bill today, it doesn't mean they're a done deal. It doesn't mean they're getting to yes yet. So the math still isn't all there, but it's a very good day for the Senate Republican tax writers.
But now, Allie, walk us through where this happens. So even if they get this through the Senate, this is not finished and over yet. They still need to go to conference with the House. And those two bills, although they're not identical, they're pretty far apart, too.
They're absolutely far apart on some critical points. So both bills, the similarities, you're going to, in both of them, if you do the standard deduction, that doubles. The child tax credit doubles. But that's sort of where a lot of the similarities end. The House bill would allow the Senate bill would not allow any of those state and local tax deductions that folks in high tax and perhaps coincidentally, or we think not, Democratic states rely on heavily. Those SALT deductions, they're called state and local taxes. The House bill would allow that $10,000 in property taxes that, what I mentioned earlier, Susan Collins wants to add that to the Senate bill. There are some other critical things. The Senate bill includes a lot more popular tax deductions that the House bill does not. So you're right, John. The Senate still has to pass this bill on the Senate floor with a 51 vote. They're trying to get that done Thursday, but they still don't absolutely have the votes. But then after that happens, the House and the Senate have to merge their bills, and then they've got to vote on that again, and then they've got to get it to the president's desk, and they want to do all of this by Christmas.
And really quickly, Allie, how many working days they got left? Not a lot.
Not a lot. Definitely less than you and me, John.
Oh, great. Lucky them, unfortunate for us. Allie Rogan, thanks very much from Capitol Hill. We appreciate it. Tara, they need a hit here. End of the year. He said this big, beautiful Christmas present. I don't know. I'm getting a little more. How are you? What are you thinking?
I don't think we should underestimate the fact that they will probably pull this together. They need this more than is really, politically, if they don't have this legislative win, they're all gone. So there's a bit of a desperation, and I'm sure that some of these budget hawks might make some concessions, knowing that they need this right now.
And I know you've been talking to people over in the White House. What do you think the mood right now is of the president? I mean, he's obviously anxious. He very much wants a hit. He has said repeatedly taxes is the issue he knows best. If this doesn't happen, who do you think gets blamed in all of this?
Well, he will probably wipe out his entire legislative team. Also, he will blame Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan, who have become his whipping boys, so that's not...
They showed up today, though.
Right, exactly. I'm sure that many of those moderates who've been on the fence, like Jeff Flake and Corker, will also get a few tweet lashings, but
they're leaving.
Right. But at the end of the day, the president will be the one stuck with this, and he may have to end up working with a very different House and Senate, one that will be much more difficult to work with. If he thinks the Republicans are difficult to work with, just wait till he's got to work with Democrats. So
Chinese food for Chuck and Nancy. We're going to have to see if that happens again. Tara, thank you. Thank you for joining us on ABC. For all the latest, you can download the ABC News app and always go to abcnews.com. I'm John Santucci in Washington for Tara Palmieri. Have a great day.